foolish mortals, back to the villain's lair. I have to be honest with you, I honestly considered leaving Bailey and Oliver in the other room for this one. I thought it might be too scary for them, especially Oliver since he has black and white spots. Today's villain is Cruella de Ville. Now, according to author Ridley Pearson, who wrote the Kingdom Keepers series of books, Disney itself considers Maleficent its most evil villain of all time. However, Cruella de Vil is the only one who, in her source material, the novel of 101 Dalmatians, is actually a sociopath. Like, legit, mentally ill sociopath. This woman be crazy, and not even in like a derogatory way. Okay, so to summarize the Disney movie, Cruella is a former schoolmate of Anita's, and when she hears that Anita's dog is going to have puppies, Dalmatian puppies, she wants to buy them from Anita to make into a fur coat. She is a spoiled, wealthy heiress with a huge collection of fur coats, and she wants to add Dalmatians to that. Now, oh, Bailey's walking away. I told you it'd be too much for her. But, she basically, when she goes to buy the puppies, she's rude, insulting, and horrible, and Roger already had some reservations about selling the puppies to be made into a fur coat anyway, and so that just pushes it over the edge. He says, no, I'm not selling these puppies to you. So later she sends her henchmen, Jasper and Horace, to break into the house, assault their poor little cute cook lady who is adorable, and they steal the puppies anyway. I believe Pongo and Perdita had 13 puppies to begin with. However, Cruella has been buying or otherwise procuring puppies from all over England till they eventually have 99 puppies, which she figures will be enough to make a coat. Now, I've never owned a Dalmatian. I don't know how big a Dalmatian puppy is, but 99 seems a little excessive for a coat, especially when you see how skinny and tiny Cruella is. So you're like, I don't think that many puppies have to die for you to have this coat, but she's determined 99 puppies. So she's stolen them, and she's keeping them in her mansion, which is called Hell Hall, and with Horace and Jasper. Now, once she determines that the police are kind of onto her, she commands Horace and Jasper at that mansion to go ahead and skin the puppies, which happens to be the night the puppies decide to make their escape. The rest of the movie is them rushing over the English countryside, outsmarting Horace and Jasper and Cruella, and trying to escape. They do inevitably make it home, and Roger and Anita are unable to turn away any of the puppies, so they go from having 16 Dalmatians to 101 when you include Pongo and Perdita. Cruella inevitably gets caught, but not in the way you'd think. She actually is caught because of her own horrible driving skills. So, I don't know, I feel like her driving would even make a driver's ed teacher cringe, and they've seen everything, guys. But this woman is the most manic, crazy driver of all time, which sucks because she has a gorgeous car, and, you know, if you're a bad driver, at least buy a cheap car. I mean, that way if you destroy it, nobody has to feel bad about it. No, she has a fantastic car, and she drives like a maniac on fire. So, there are some kind of differences between Cruella in the movie and Cruella in the book. In the book, she's much less manic than she is in the book. In the book, she's more cold and calculating, whereas in the movie, she is just crazy. You know, her personality is definitely reflected in the way she drives. She's just so angry and so wildly emotional, and that pretty much the only emotion is anger. And so she gets so obsessed that she loses all control and is just wildly impulsive and manic, whereas in the book she's very calculating, very cold, kind of like a female Moriarty kind of character. She is so calculating and so bereft of normal human emotions that her husband was chosen not because she loved or even liked the guy, not because she was attracted to him, or even thought he was a good conversational partner. She married this man simply because he was a furrier and because he had kind of a shy, submissive personality, so she could dominate any decisions that happened in their household to such an extent that she has him take her last name. Now, guys, I'm not a wild feminazi. I did take my husband's last name as well, but to me, if my husband's last name was Devil, I probably wouldn't have done. And so I feel bad for her husband because he's not only taken in this non-traditional emasculating role of taking on his wife's last name, but consider what that last name is. Like, she's definitely got this guy under her thumb. There are a lot of, guys that are allies now that sympathize with feminism and would take their wife's last name. But I feel like when that last name is Devil, it should at least give you pause about what decisions you're making. Maybe not only with the last name, but with the wife who carries it. I probably wouldn't want to marry somebody whose name was Devil. But now that I've said that, there's going to be somebody out there who's perfectly lovely, whose last name, unfortunately, is some foreign spelling of, like, Shaitan or something, So now that I've said that, it's going to come back and bite me, because that's how things go for me. But you understand the problem. Like, I understand a lot of women keep their own last name, especially considering she was a wealthy heiress, may have had some notoriety or something, but to force your husband to take the last name Devil, just, ugh. It's an icky last name, and it makes me uncomfortable. So she's also shown to be very abusive to animals, which is usually one of the primary indicators of somebody having some kind of antisocial mental issue. You see not only her obvious attempt to capture and kill all of these puppies just so she can have a brand new super cool coat, but it's also commented on in the novel that she has a very sad, abused cat that she doesn't get it fixed, but every time it gets pregnant, she drowns all of its kittens. She sees drowning as the solution to any animal that's not productive, any animal that doesn't create something for her, and that's why you see mentioned in the movie her first instinct when the puppies are white and haven't developed their spot yet is she calls it a horrid little white rat. It should be taken to the river and drowned. That seems pretty extreme for a Disney movie until you realize that that quote is coming from the actual novel and how Cruella treats her own pets, her own animal in her life. Why would you keep a cat if you hated it that much? This cat in the novel is like perpetually in a state of depression because she abuses it and because of all of the kittens it's lost. And so, I don't even know why you would have the cat if you're going to treat it so ungraciously. I don't know. Just, there's some kind of sadism there. She enjoys hurting other things. And she has a massive collection of furs, so it's interesting that she would even bother killing and, turning animals into fur when she obviously gets greater joy out of hurting them when they're alive. I don't know. This woman is crazy, and of course a sane mind cannot understand and rationalize an insane mind. That's part of the, basis of the mind being insane. And therefore, I can't truly say that I understand her, but I understand what motivates her. And for her, that's this vanity and power and the ability to kind of gain some kind of strange pleasure out of harming other creatures. She's motivated, as I said, partially by vanity. In both the book and the movie, she is a fashionista. She's super into, fancy clothes and furs. In the movie, it looks like she's wearing either a satin or a velvet black gown underneath a very, very large fur coat that is, enormous and kind of shrouds the fact that she's obviously got some sort of horrible eating disorder. I mean, when your hips come to points, it's not great. Things are looking rough for Cruella, and she needs a nutritionist stat. But yeah, she's incredibly spoiled. Nobody has ever told her no in her life, and she, like I mentioned earlier, chose her husband specifically because he was not someone who was ever going to refuse her anything and had access to fur. She's creepy. Yeah, super creepy. But yeah, she's never learned how to handle being refused anything, which is why when Roger refuses to sell her the puppies, she goes absolutely off the wall. Most of us learn how to deal with being told we can't have or do something when we're children. It's part of growing up. It's part of maturing. And so people who are very, very spoiled as children are often completely dysfunctional adults, and we see this with Cruella de Vil. That, coupled with her obvious mental disorder, again, I'm not a psychologist, so I couldn't tell you exactly what mental disorder, and since she's a fictional character, often fictional characters are usually a combination of several different mental disorders where different symptoms have been cherry-picked. Fictional characters usually don't follow an actual specific diagnostic mental disorder, but there's clearly something very wrong. And So I think she has some kind of antisocial personality disorder. Not a doctor or psychologist, I couldn't tell you specifically what, but clearly that is, something's a little off tilt in her brain, and I think that partially contributes to why she jumps so quickly from, I can't have puppies, well, I guess I'm going to terrorize the whole English countryside. Not a jump most of us would make. Most of us don't go, well, if I can't buy puppies from Roger, I'm going to go buy them from someone else, rather than, if I can't buy puppies from Roger, I'm going to steal them all. That's quite a leap, and especially when a lot of people have puppies for sale. Like, if you aren't going for purebred puppies, you can actually get puppies pretty cheaply. There are shelters where they will literally almost give you puppies, and so for her to make that jump from being refused to immediately moving to robbery, there's just something not right going on in her head. And again, I'm not a doctor, so I have no idea what specifically is wrong with her brain, but something's wrong with her brain. Vengeance is also a huge, huge motivator for Cruella. It's, going back to that she's never been told the word no. When Roger refuses her and tells her no, she sees it as an act of violence against her. She sees that as him pushing back on her when, doesn't he know she should have everything she wants? She should never have to do anything she doesn't want to do. And to her, this normal, commonplace thing is the equivalent of an assault, because to her it has never happened before. She doesn't understand that somebody can tell you no, and that's just a normal part of life. To her, it's not a normal part of life. To her, it is almost an act of violence, and I think we see this in our society a lot today, and we see it with Cruella de Vil. People who cannot handle, who are not emotionally mature enough to handle being told no, and they equate it, falsely I might add, with some kind of violence or assault. Your feelings are not the same as being assaulted. Obviously there are people who are mentally and verbally abused, but that is not what happened here. But that's how Cruella saw it. She sees any kind of pushback to her views as equivalent with an assault. This is deranged, but this is how she feels. And so that leads to this feeling of vengeance. She thinks she has to avenge herself because some kind of wrong has been done to her, and that leads to obsession. And so I think these are all of the strange, twisted motivations of Cruella de Vil. Normal people are driven by vengeance, by obsession, and to some extent, a lot of us are driven by vanity. But Cruella de Vil takes it to an extent that is dangerous, I think, possibly because of growing up in such a spoiled environment, and partially due to her own possible mental disorder. And so these are, I think, the motivations behind the sociopath Cruella de Vil. Now, hide your doggies, because they don't want to hear this story. My doggies stayed and listened. I think they're doing okay. But yeah, they don't want to hear about Cruella de Vil. This is not a movie that I see in Disney parks or in Disney video games or movies that often, and I think it's scary. I think even children can look at Cruella's reactions to situations and like, what's wrong with that lady? Something's very off about her. And sadly, I think we do all know somebody in our lives who there's just something a little off. The way they react to things is just a little inappropriate, and Cruella is kind of a satirical extreme of that reaction to everything. And so, that's Cruella de Vil. And the song is fantastic. I encourage you to listen to it. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear more from me, you can check out my podcast on Fridays on Patreon or SoundCloud. That's patreon.com/shiveringmouse. It's the Shivering Mouse Podcast. And you can also find me at Twitter, at shiveringmouse1, and my blog at shiveringmouse.wordpress.com. I look forward to hearing from you guys in the future for future episodes of The Villain's Lair. And thank you so much for tuning in today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, even though it was kind of an unpleasant topic. But thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.